Okay. Kum Lernen Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Ayin Zayin Amar Aleph. We're discussing David HaMelech's antecedents, Moav v'lo Moavi, and Ammon v'lo Ammon. Not everybody agreed to it. In fact, we learned other Gemaras that Boaz had to make a declaration as well. He's the one who married Ruth in the first place, and we find that Doimi was against it, and he stumped everybody. And we had a machlekes as to how we know that the females amongst Moav and Ammon were all right, either because we just stressed the word Moavi, which is written in masculine form, or because the pasuk gives us a reason, like Rav Shimon says, and that reason didn't apply to the women because they were because the people of Ammon refused to go ahead and share food with the Yidden, so therefore they did, and so the men who goes there. So we're up to the Gemara here, that right in the middle of the page, the last line is Dora Shirava. Rava Darshit. Ma'idich Siv, it says a pasuk, we say in Hallow, Pitachtu le'moiseiroi. You open up those straps that we had. Amadov Negas Baruch Hu. What is he talking about? And but obviously, Eibush Rebbeinu Shalom. Shnei Masodas Shahoya Alai. I had like baggage. I had these two straps on me, which is my ancestor, which is Rus. And then Shlomo Melech is going to marry Naama from Moavi, from what do you call it? From Ammoni. So we're just starting. Then we're going to hear an Ayin Zayin, right? By Rava said, it says, right in the middle of the page. Pitachtola Maseda, you open up my straps. You open up my two straps that held me down. Rus Hamayavia, you allowed Rus because she's female, and also Naama Ammainis. Both of them were permitted to marry, so we are all right. Darash Rava Darshan. Ma'idich Siv, it says a pasuk. Rabbi Sasita, he said, Rabbi Sasita Atra Hashem Lekenu Secha Mashasecha Elenu, that you did so many wonderful things, and this is regarding what did Hashem do? It doesn't say a lie to me, a lie to us. Who's us? Because David was on the receiving end of all his ridicule, and so was Rechavam. His grandson, Rechavam was sitting on the lap of David. And David Melech was having a discussion with his grandson, and he said, Alai, the Alecha Halalu, regarding me and regarding you, these psukim were said, that you helped us out, that even though I become from Moav and Ammon, because it comes from the female, and you said it's mutter, everything's all right. Taking about further, talking about the daughter of Rabbi Dashem, I said in the pasuk, Ozo Marti. I then said, Hine Bossi. I now came the Megillah Sefer with a scroll, Kosu Alai, written about me. Which scroll was written about David HaMelech? So he says as follows: when he was being anointed as the king, what happened there? I thought, well, you chose me, selected me now that I should become the king. I didn't know Megillah Sefer in the Torah itself, Kosev Olai. In the Torah itself already, it's alluded to us. Hasam see, it says by Lot over there that you should save Lot's daughter, take your wife and two daughters. Why? Because they might succumb to the sin. And it says there, it says Hanim Tza'os. Two daughters you had that are found in your house. And Hachaksiv, and here it says Hillim that Matzasi, I found David Avi B'Shem Kachim Meshachtiv, and I anointed him with oil. But I found the same word, the same expression. That means already then, why was Lot saved and his daughters so that David HaMelech can be born and Rechavam? Okay, now back to the halacha side of the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Abbas Geir Ammoni Sheda Lekuna. I want you to know that the daughter, if the father is a Geir from Ammon, which he is forbidden to marry to the Jewish nation, and the daughter, and he converted, the daughter is kosher v'kuna. He is a Yid, because he's from Ammon, and he and right now we're under the supposition that the mother is also from Ammon. But the mother is permitted to convert and everything else. She's allowed to marry anybody she wants, and the father isn't. And that daughter, you should know, is kosher for kahuna. Says the Gemara, who we talking about? We already had previously a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that in order for a child, for someone to be suitable to marry a kohen, both parents have to be Yidden. And either the parent is a ger, even an ordinary ger, that the child, a pogrom, cannot marry a kohen. So obviously, this thing that you're saying here is not just a ger, it's an amoin from Ammon, which is worse because they can never enter the fold, is surely the daughter is not kosher l'kuna. It can't be a kosher Yehuda. According to this follow, he holds bas ger zocher. The mother is a full-fledged yid, and just the father is a ger. Kibas chol zocher has the same status as the daughter of a chol, which means that she's disqualified from marrying a kohen. How can it be? How can I be able to say it didn't according to him? And must be according to Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi holds that even if both parents are gerim, it doesn't matter. It says they were both, since she was born as a yid, she herself is not a ger, so she could marry a kohen. So if the mother, so in this case here, the mother and the father are both gerim, sort of from Ammon. They're allowed to marry each other, and because therefore the child is kosher. So what's the chiddush? Of course, she can marry a kohen. The daughter is kosher l'kuna. So what's the big deal here? So the Gemara, if you want to tell me that not, we would have thought, when does he say that the daughter is kosher l'kuna, that they're gadim and the parents are gadim, both parents are gadim, but they both are able to marry any Jew or Jewess that they want. Okay. But in this case, since the father is from Ammon and he cannot marry into the Jewish fold, I would have thought that since the father cannot marry into the Jewish fold, therefore the daughter is disqualified from marrying a kohen, and that's why the chiddush is he can. Says the Gemara, Minole, why would you have thought so? So what if the father cannot marry into the fold? The fact is that he's Jewish and he's a ger, and the B'yisi holds that the parents are gave him as long as she was born as a yid, she can marry a kohen. Why should it be any different? Why should it have any bearing on her qualification to marry a kohen? Says the Gemara, and not only that, the mother is like a full-fledged yid, because by women from Ammon they're all right. Says the Gemara, the Aleph, he would have thought we should learn out from a kohen godel and an almana. A kohen gadol is not allowed to marry an almana, and the daughter is a chalola and apostle. The daughter is, if a kohen gadol marries an almana, which is not allowed to a widow, the daughter is disqualified. So I would have thought that maybe over here also something is wrong because the father is from Ammon, can't marry anybody in the Jewish fold. Maybe the daughter is disqualified. So, what are you comparing? In the case of the kohen gadol, he's doing an avera. In the case of the Ammon, he's allowed to marry his wife from Ammon as well. So what's the problem? Because she's not Kol, so they're allowed to marry each other. No Aveda happened. Why should you think daughters disqualified? They committed an Aveda. It makes sense that the daughter should be disqualified. But in our case, an Amoini who marries an Amoinis, which is 100% legal, so why should the child be disqualified? The Gemara said, well, Cholol Yechiach. I'll prove him a Chol. A Chol, a Kohen whose father married a divorcee. So he himself now is a Kohen Chol. He's been a Kohen who's desecrated. He's allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. He can marry anybody. And he's not doing a sin. And yet their child, their daughter, is also a cholol, cannot marry a kohen. Cholol yichiach, so not necessarily it's the aveda that causes the child to be disqualified. So what are you comparing? The chol himself was born through a sin. His father was a kohen who married a divorcee, not allowed to, and because they committed a sin, the child from that union is a chol. So maybe it makes sense that the granddaughter is disqualified from marrying a kohen. In the case of the Amoini, no aveda was done, or they weren't born with a sin either. A guy that have children. Kohen Gadol Yichir. The Kohen Gadol will prove it that the Kohen Gadol himself wasn't born in sin, and yet the daughter is disqualified. But the Kohen Gadol didn't have Aveda. So Chazer Hadim, we go back and forth between the Kohen Gadol and the Cholol. Each one has a different chumrah. Hatzad Hashavah Shebehen. What do they have in common? She'ena Berev Kol. What they have in common is that the sin that they committed is they're different than everybody else because there's something wrong in each case. For example, the Kohen Gadol committed a sin by living with a widow. The Kohen Hedjid was born from a sin. Is the Ubite Psulas, Afkan over here also, She'ein Berev Kol. Over here also, that since the father cannot marry into the Kol, Ubite Psula, the daughter should be possible. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? You're right, each one has a different angle. But the fact of the matter is, She'kein Yehesh Behen Tzarabeda. Each one of them, there's an angle of a sin involved. Right? Either they're born in sin or they committed a sin. Here in my mind, no sin happened from the beginning, no sin happened now. So why should the child even be disqualified? That you need to tell me that it's not disqualified. So the Gemara says that Dilma, Who said we're talking about an Amoini who married an Amoinis where no sin happened? No, we're talking about over here an Amoini that married a Jewish girl. Now a sin did happen. Amoini married a Jew. Amoini don't marry anybody born Jewish, and he did. So an Aveda happened. So we would have thought, well, an Aveda happens like an Amon Kohen Gadol, the daughter should be disqualified from a Kohen, and the Chizah is that's not disqualified. Now you'll ask another way around. How do you taka know? Why taka isn't the daughter disqualified? Anyway, the Gemara first says, Dilma, are you really talking about an Amoini who married a Jewish girl and we misunderstood you? I forgot the Beyosef Aveda, and you're trying to tell us a chiddush that even though a sin was committed, the daughter is kosher. He said exactly right. Exactly what I meant to say. And we'll soon see how we know. And how do I know that? Also, Ravin came along and he said, Abbas Geir Amoni, the daughter of a male Amoni, Geir. Ubas Mitzri Sheni, and the daughter of a Mitzri Sheni. Now remember, Mitzri Sheni is not allowed to marry into the Jewish fold, but his kids can. So their daughters, Rabbi Yechon says Ksheder. Rabbi Yechon says that both can marry anybody. And the Shlakish Omar Psula, the Shlakish they cannot marry a Kohen. The Shlakish Psula, the Yah of one Kohen Gadol mother. The Shlakish the Apostle because it's no different than the Kohen Gadol and Almana, where what since a sin occurred, a Mitzri is not allowed to marry a Jewish woman, and neither can a Moin Geir marry a Jewish woman. And both committed a sin, and just like a Kohen Gadol marrying a widow committed a sin, the daughter is disqualified from marrying a Kohen. Same thing with them. And Rabbi Yechanan agrees. He says, you're right by Kohen Gadol, but not in this case. Sheda, in the case of an Ammon or Mitzi married, their daughter is qualified to marry a Kohen. How do we talk about? And why should that be the case? The Tani, Rab Zakkai, who was from the following discussion between Rab Zakkai and Rabbi Yechanan, we can infer what Rabbi Yechanan actually holds. The Tani, Rab Zakkai once said, Kamed Rabbi Yechanan before Rabbi Yechanan, it says in Pasuk, who should a Kohen Gadol marry? Ki im sulam ma'amav. He should not marry a widow. He should not marry a divorcee. He should not marry a chalola, someone who born from parents who committed a sin. He should not marry a zoiner. But who should he marry? Ki im sulam ma'amav. He should take a girl who's a virgin, me'amav, from this nation. Yikach isha. The word ma'amav is we're going to play with that word. Could have said amav. Maybe didn't say anything. Lahavi comes to teach us as well. Who else can he take? Me'amav. Giyadis. He can take a giyadis mechana. He can take a giyadis where that the father and the mother come from the same nation. He can take a giyadis come from the same nation. That's what he said. One second. If the parents are both gated from the same nation, that daughter is qualified to be a kohen. Knows we pass Rabbi Yasi that the daughter can marry a kohen as long as the daughter is born as a yid. On the other hand, if according to this, if let's say somebody from Ammon married a Jewish girl, so they're from two different nations, then the daughter is disqualified and she cannot marry a kohen. The Gemara, why not? Because a sin was committed. We're talking about not just Tama Gay, we're talking about a gay that there's a sin involved, like from Mitzri or Ammon. Comes along, Amalei of Yechon said back to him, no, I say Amav. It could have said Amav by saying me Amav, even partial from another nation. Lahavi to include Psula, to a Psula Habom Bezamin, that each parent is part of a nation, over the two different nations, where the father is an Amoni, the mother is a Bas Yisrael, and maybe that's what it means. And there's two different nations, and even though sin happened, the daughter is qualified. The At Omid Giyel Mekana, you insist that the Giyelis can only work out if both parents are the same nation, and disagree. The Su Loy and no more. Now he used the word he used the word two nations. He doesn't spell out what he meant when he said two nations. So there's two. We can learn Ilema Ammonish and Nas Ammonish. You could argue that two nations is the father is from Ammon and the mother's from Ammon. And why the two nations? Because the mother's allowed to marry a Jewish person and the father's not allowed to. So it's treated like two different nations. Umay Mishnei Ammon, and why they're called two nations? The Chodim Asur, the males are forbidden to marry in the Jewish fold. They came with daughters. And that's what Makapot is saying, that the father's from Ammon, the mother's from Ammon, the daughter's all right, and Rabbi Yechon is against it. Is Hainu Geir Mekana. If that's what Rabbi Yechon meant when he said that, yes, I hold that it's all right, if they're both from two nations, and he meant Ammon, Makapot, Rabbi Zakkai is saying exactly the same thing. He's saying Mekana, which is one nation, because they're both from Ammon, and Rabbi Yechon using different expressions, but they mean the same thing. What are they arguing about? Obviously, what they're arguing about is if the Ammoni did an Aveda and he married a Jewish girl, Shenosa Bas Yisrael. So according to, and so he didn't say clearly, but we're interpreting his words. So according to Zakkai, because the the two different nations are not Mekana in the same nation. This is a Jewish woman. This is not mine. Therefore, the daughter disqualified because Aveda happened. And Rabbi Yechon is still all right. And that's what we said. But Ikadam, other side, Rabbi Yechon said clearly. Amalei said, "Ani sheina amav me'amav lahavi." Rabbi Yechon spelled it out to include a psula hab. Sorry, just look, please. Psula haba mishnei amin, to include a psula that comes from two nations. Ume'am sheyesh b'shnei amin. You can have one nation that's like two nations. And ba'at omrid, and you say gi'edes mekana. He said clearly, I hold a psula from two nations, which is what? A Yiddish woman and an Amoin. And that gate himself comes from a nation that's split into two. That's how I learned. He's Mishnei Amin and Uma'am Shez Mishnei Amin. There were two nations there. The father was an Amoini who married a Yiddish Bas Yisrael, which they did in the Sid. And the father was from a nation that nation itself is considered two nations because the women there are permitted to marry Yid and the males are not. And you should know that daughter can marry a Kohen. So he learns from the word Ma'amov. The Adam and Giyad is Mekana. You say only should be the same nation. No, I hold even that case is permitted. So so therefore that's how we know Rabbi Yechon holds this chiddush here that even though by Amon Kohen Gadol the daughter is disqualified, but in the case of Ammon marrying a Yiddish woman, the child can marry a Kohen. Says the Gemara, Lahach Lishnas, according to this lashon, we clearly spelled it out. That what are we including? The daughter of someone from Ammon with a Bas Yisrael. Why? Because he himself comes from a two-nation country. So what about a Bas Mitzri Sheni? The other example I gave was a daughter, a Mitzri Sheni is not allowed to marry a woman. The daughter is qualified. But the Mitzri Sheni is not from a two-nation. It doesn't come from a two nations because there's no difference in males and females. So what's the head to there? Why can their daughter marry a Kohen Gadol? Bas Mitzri Sheni Shel how do you know that? And because Chayla did a sin, no different than Monica and God, the daughter should be disqualified. The pasuk Amav only teaches you the two nations got married, and the man came from a nation that's divided two nations. But Mitch, you're not divided two nations. Says if you're going to tell me, once we've established that an Amoini marries a Yiddish woman, even though they're in sin, the daughter is qualified to marry Kohen Gadol. So a mitzvah is the same thing, even though they're living in sin. So we just draw a similar. We just learn it out straight directly. I'll tell you, I'll argue that Mala Amoini Shenosa Bas Yisrael. You know why an Amoini who married Bas Yisrael were lenient? Shekeni Kevim Mataris. The females of Amoin are actually permitted, and therefore straight away. But Mitzri Sheni is more strict because there's no difference in male or a female. You got to wait till the third generation before anybody can enter the fold. So because we have a leniency by Amoin, maybe that's why the daughter of a union of an Amoin and a Yiddish woman were lenient, and we allow them to marry Kohen Gadol. Mitzri Sheni Shenosa Mitzri is more than enough. A Mitzri Sheni Shenosa Mitzri Yechiach. If both are second generation, the father and the mother of the Mitzri, their daughter is 100% kosher because she's a third generation. But this is totally permitted. So therefore, there's a leniency there. So where it goes back. No, you know why the daughter is totally legitimate? Because nobody committed a sin. But when the Mitzri Sheni married a Bas Yisrael, a sin was committed. So who said in that instance the daughter is all right? Amoini Shenosa Bas Yisrael Yechiach. And Amoini married Bas Yisrael will prove it to you. They did it. They committed a sin, and yet the daughter is qualified. Chazar Adin, we go back and forth. And what's the tzad hashava? That even though they both are not, they both are not really suitable to marry the Klal Yisrael, not the Ammoni, not the Mitzri Sheni, but the daughters are qualified to marry Kohen. He said, now I understand. I want you to say, Amav, me Amav. He once walked around saying a story about Amav and me Amav. He had no clue what he was talking about. And now we know exactly what he was talking about. Says the Gemara, when Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Yehuda, came along, he said, so Rabbi Yehuda, who was a student of Shmuel, called his son, Shmuel. We see that so often. He said, this is what we learned before. This is what Rabbi Zakkai learned before Rabbi Yechanan. Isha Ammon is ksheira. A woman from Ammon is kosher. This is what he said. A certain Bryce. This is the Bryce that Rabbi Zakkai said before Rabbi Yechanan. If a woman is from Ammon and she get married, her daughter is 100% kosher, which is we know also see. Of course, all the women in Ammon are kosher. But no, Ma'amoni, if her husband is from Ammon and they have a son, that son is just like the father of Ammon and cannot marry Yid. Possible. cannot marry Yid. Ubita me'amayni, but if the husband is from Ammon, and they have a daughter, Sheda, right? If they have a daughter, the daughter is kosher. When is the daughter kosher to marry Kohen? Both parents did not live in sin; they were both gerim, and the daughter's born kosher. She's 100% kosher. Avo bita ma'amayni, but if the daughter came from Amayni and the mother was a Yisrael, so Aveda was committed, psula, that daughter cannot marry a Kohen. Omalei, so Rabbi Yechon said, "Put on the bro, take this brayso and throw it out because it's not right." And I'll explain you the brayso that's correct and the part that's incorrect. My dam, this had to say Isha Amaynik Sheda, that a woman Amaynis is kosher. Yes, 100%. The daughters are all right. Amayni, but Amaynis. Amayni is masculine and not the female. Fine. But not Amayni, the father is Amayni apostle. Yes, you're right again. Amayni who? He's Amayni. Ubita Amaynik Sheda, and then you say the daughter from Ammon is kosher. Lemai. What do you mean? You tell me what do you tell me the daughter from Ammon is kosher to what? As to marry a Jew? Even the mother, who herself was an Ammoni, is allowed to marry. Sure, the daughter's allowed to marry. What's the chiddush here? To marry a Jewish woman, a Jewish person, Jewish man. The mother, who originally was herself from Ammon, she converted. She's allowed to marry a Yid. So the daughter, of course, born a Jew, of course, a Jewess, of course, she's allowed to. Ella lekahuna. You tell me what? That they're talking about the daughter marrying a Kohen. That's what the Rice is telling us. And then you're qualifying the statement as follows. When can the daughter marry a Kohen? Both parents, both parents were from Ammon. So they didn't really commit a sin when they got married. So the daughter was born Jewish, can marry a Kohen. No sin took place. She is Gaido. But you're trying to tell me the Bryce is saying, but if the mother was a Yid and the father was a Goy, so they're living in sin, the daughter disqualified. If you tell me they're both Ammoni, that's the same nation. Everybody agrees that that's all right to marry a Kohen. We're talking about Ammoni married a Bas Yisrael. That's what you're talking about. And I want you to know, therefore, throw it out, because that's not the halacha. The halacha is that even though the parents lived in sin, we learn out from Amav Me'amav that the daughter from such a union can marry a Kohen. Okay, so then we had a machlekes in the Mishnah. We then said, came along, a mitzi and a daimi are forbidden to two generations, male and females, and the third generation they're permitted. Came along and Shimon said, no. Madach ba'amun, which is so strict, it's forevermore. The males are forbidden, yet the females are permitted straight away. So surely mitzi and a daimi, which only have two generations, surely their wives or the women there should be able to be mutter straight away. So the Chacham said, if this is your tradition, okay. But if it is a Kavachim in logic, we can undermine the entire Kavachim. And the Gemara wants to know how. Because we didn't say in the Mishnah how. Says the Gemara mitzvah in my tshuva, how could the Chachamim undermine what he's saying? We can say we can say that Aroyes itself will prove them wrong. Why? Because what's generally Aroyes? Aroyes is you're not allowed to live with your daughter, you're not allowed to live with the granddaughter. But beyond that, don't go your mother and your grandmother. Don't go any further. It's only we have a thing called shnias, which is the rabbanon. But from the Torah, all arayos are also only 3 generations, and that's it. Don't go any further. And there's no difference. Yet there's no difference, males or females. You would actually want to say that if it only goes 2 generations, and that the generation is permitted, that we should make a difference in males and females. From Ammon and Moab, all arayos only are limited to a couple of generations, and yet there's no distinction between males and females. So we see that just because it's a shorter we're going to Easter doesn't in any way make an allowance for making a difference in men and women. It's only 3 generations forbidden, and yet echad makes no difference, male and females. So the Mother jumps and says, to defend Rav Shimon Yochai, how can you bring Arayos in? Arayos is so stringent, because it's so strict, because you get chorus for Arayos, therefore, makes no difference males or females. But we're talking about mitzvah and daimi, all it is a chiv asay, that they should not marry into the Jewish fold. So therefore, who said, all the public says is that the children they will have, the 3rd generation can come back. So if you learn now that they can't before that, you're not allowed to. So it's a lav habom miklal asay, it's so much weaker. So maybe there should be a distinction male and female. So you can't cut us. There's cutters involved. Mashenkin and mitzvah and daimi, there's no cutters involved. So maybe there's a difference in male and female. Says about a mamzer yichir. A mamzer, if a mamzer lives with a Yiddish woman, there's no chorus involved. There's a lot. There's no chorus involved, and yet we say that the child of that union is a mamzer, regardless if it's a male or a female. So we see the mamzer. Listen, mala mamzer is different. She came ein ro love bekola olam. A mamzer is not like a mitzvah. Then we're talking about something that's forbidden for 2 generations, or arroyas that only go for 2 or 3 generations. You're bringing in mamzer, which is ad olam, goes on forever. So because mamzer has that stringency that it goes on forever, therefore there's no difference male or female. Doesn't disprove what we said. So yeah, and Shimon about arroyas is different than this chorus. Says the Gemara, Arroyos will prove it. It's not forever. It's only 3 generations, and yet there's no distinction between males and females. The Chazar Dim go back and forth, back and forth. Each one has a churma the other one doesn't have. Hatzad Hashavah Shabam. What do both have in common? Sha'asudim. They are forbidden. The echad chori, the echad kevis. A mamzer is no difference of a male or female. The children mamzerim. And when it comes to Arroyos, the 3 generations, no difference if it's the daughter of your son, the daughter of your daughter, it makes no difference. Is af ani avi, and therefore I will say the same thing here. There's no male or female. Mitzvahs. So there also is no difference males or females. And just because by Adoim and Maya and Amay, that's a special exception. Amayim Moav is a special exception. Says the Gemara, 1 second. In these 2 cases, you give me mamzer, and in the case of arroyas, and you want to know why there's no difference males or females. I'll tell you why. Because even though, let's say, there's no kares by mamzer, but he was born from an aver of kares, a married woman, and had an affair, and that's an isra of kares. There's an angle of kares in each one of them. Masha'en Kain, in the case of Amoin or in the case of Moavi, there's no kares whatsoever. Therefore, we're much more lenient. Where you don't bring me any proof from there, and therefore there we make a distinction. Men and women. Shimon said the same thing should be by mitzvah. By a mitzvah, sheni, there's no kares involved. There should be that the women there should be permitted straight away and not have to wait till the 3rd generation. Don't bring me arroyas, or don't bring me mamzer with this stringent side to it, which is an aspect of kares. Nu taker rabbanon. What Rabbanon? Why they maintain that there's no kavuchim? Rabbanon, the Rabbanon, they'll say, it says, Mecholol, the Chayabe Asei, they learn out, what about a Cholol, let's say, from a Chayabe Asei, where we say over there, for example, a Kohen Gadol marries a girl that he raped or that he seduced. There's an Isra Asei there because it says in the pasuk you should marry a psula, right, and not someone who's not a psula. There's no lav marrying someone who's not a psula. It just says a positive thing. You should take a psula. Ki im psula ma'amav yikachicha, right? A mitzvah say, and so there's no lav involved whatsoever. Except Rabbi Elazar is the only one who holds that if a girl, a single girl, had even one relationship already, with even some mutter to her, she becomes a zaina. But no one else agrees to that. So there's no zaina whatsoever. And yet Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says if the Kohen Gadol lives with that girl that he raped, so therefore she is not a psula. It's only a chiyav asay. Their daughter is disqualified from she's marrying a Kohen. She's a cholol. So therefore, Rabbanan say mecholol the chayav asay. We learned from a cholol chayav asay, but there's no kares involved whatsoever, and yet the daughter is disqualified. So the same thing they say over here, that there's no distinction male and female when it comes to a mitzvah sheni, makes no difference. My life. So what did Rav Shimon Yochai said? Rav Shimon Yochai, they asked him if it's logic, we can undermine it. He said to them, "Loi no." He says, first of all, you cannot slug me up, and second of all, ki halachani omer. I'm telling you what I heard a tradition from my rabbis. What do you mean by saying loi no? I don't agree with your question. I don't realize Yaakov. I actually hold that a Kohen Gadol with the woman that his anusa, the woman that he raped, that daughter is not taka. It could marry a Kohen Gadol because it's only from a chiyav asay. I hold no problem with it, and that's why I hold mitzvah sheni the same thing, that the women should be permitted. You, the Sfiluch Rabbi Yaakov, even you who agree with Rabbi Yaakov, so logically you want to argue with my Kavul Chaimet, but you should know halachani omer. I heard this from my rebbes, and therefore that's how it is. That's what we learned. It says in the Brayse, is bonim. It says in the pasuk by a mitzvah, the children that you will have, and the word that was used is bonim. Now sometimes bonim can mean non-gender, sometimes bonim means boys and not girls. So Shimon says bonim v'le bonus. He takes it literally. only the sons of a Mitzri have to wait 3 generations, but not the daughters. He holds like his Kal V'Chomer. The daughters are immediately permitted straight away. Even Reb Shimon. Omar Rabbi Yehuda says, it says in Pasuk, Bonim Asher Yivoldu Lahem. It says, Rabbi Yehuda said, it says the children that will bear Dor Shlishi, the 3rd generation, could come back. Why does the Torah have to say Shivoldu? Obviously, children are children. What do you have to say? Shivoldu Lahem means I don't care. It's non-gender. Anyone that they gave birth to is forbidden to join the fold until the 3rd generation. All has to do with if the children give birth. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda said, it's not for the fact Rabbi Yehuda said, Hakosav Tolan Belated, that we don't care if it's a boy or a girl, they are forbidden until 3rd generation. It's not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda argues of Shimon. If Rabbi Yehuda would not have said that the girls are also forbidden, which means therefore the mitzvah is allowed to marry a mitzvah. If he wouldn't have said that, if he would have said, look, the mitzvah is now a full-fledged Jewess, then the mitzvah would not be able to marry her. Then it would be a problem. Why? Kivan the Amamar. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that Kahol Geidim Ikr Kol. We don't agree with it, but Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that that a ger is also, once they converted, they're considered part of Klal Yisrael, and all those people are not allowed to marry Klal Yisrael, are not allowed to marry Geidus. So then, according to Rabbi Yehuda, this mitzvah is stuck. He has no one to marry. Can I marry a Geidus even? Forget about marrying a Jew. A Jewess can marry Geidus because they're all considered Kol. He's stuck. How is it ever going to get to the next generation? But because we learn from this pasuk that the women are also forbidden, so a mitzvah now can marry a mitzvah. The mitzvah sheni b'mayitar. How in the world will you ever be able to go further? The Gemara says, "What's a kasha?" That's a strong expression. There's no way out. Of course, there's a way out. He married a Jewish woman in sin, but he did it, and now the child, if it's the 3rd generation, the child is permitted. So why the Torah, when the Torah says 3rd generation permitted, talking about even if he did it in Issa, maybe you can't say like Motzah Yodav Raglav. So you want to with the Avav and also maybe the Torah is allowing for if he didn't listen, he defied the Torah's orders, and he married a Jewish woman, and the child, it will be kosher. Says the Gemara, the Torah doesn't make allowances if you didn't obey. The Torah is not going to tell you a heter if you didn't obey it, you should know this is all right. The Torah doesn't work that way. Says, what do we mean? How do you mamzer? The whole idea of a mamzer. A mamzer, it says the next generation, the mamzer, and the Torah says that the mamzer has it's also future generations, which means the mamzer is living in sin. He's not going to marry a Jewish woman. If he did, the children of mamzerim as well. And yet, because the Torah talked all about a mamzer. The Torah talks about the whole din of mamzer. A married woman committed a sin, and yet the Torah tells you the children of mamzerim. It talks about things that if people did the wrong thing, what the consequences are. Says Gemara, yes, you're right. The consequences where where there's the dire consequences, the Torah will delineate them. But where the consequences permitted, the Torah is not going to make allowance as if to say, oh, well, it's not so bad if you're doing Aveda because the end result will be good. Torah doesn't do that. So to say a mitzvah sheni, if you're not allowed to marry anybody, but if you did, your child is kosher, the Torah wouldn't do that. The Yisura kosher, the Torah is kosher. What do you mean? If a guy was married to a woman, then they divorced, or she married somebody else, and then she wants to come back to him, they can't. And yet the Torah says that if they come back, he to Ava, she's a problem, but the children are kosher. So the Torah clearly does tell you if you did something wrong, that, if that consequence is not so dire, the Torah allows for that as well. The Torah even informs us. The Torah kosher. Because of Hasam, so the Gemara, no. Hasam Mishum Ikri Suru. The main point there is to tell you he Ta'eva. That now she is a Ta'eva. That means if the first husband that she remarried, let's say if she's married to her husband, then she married married somebody else and came back to her husband. She is now considered a Ta'eva. That's the main thing to tell you. And from that we also learn out that the daughter is all right. But the main purpose is to tell you that she is a Ta'eva. Okay, we'll stop over here and we'll continue tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Everyone have a good day.